Fears of an all-out regional conflict in the Middle East are growing tonight as Lebanese officials say nearly 500 people have been killed, including 35 children, and 1,600 others injured in Israeli strikes on the south of the country. The Israel Defense Forces say they've hit around 1,300 positions held by the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah. It says it's fired dozens of rockets at Israel. The cross-border strikes have intensified after a series of exploding device attacks on Hezbollah members were blamed on Israel. We'll hear from our international editor Jeremy Bowen, who's in Jerusalem, our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams in northern Israel, where people are living with the threat of rocket attacks by Hezbollah. But first to our chief international correspondent Orla Guerin, who's in Beirut for us now. Orla.
Tonight on the roads into Beirut, there is chaos. So many people are trying to flee to the capital that the traffic is paralysed. Some airlines have cancelled flights to and from Beirut. Schools here won't open tomorrow because they've been turned into centres for the displaced. And the death toll already around 500 people in a single day. Now that's almost half the overall figure the last time the two sides went to war in 2006. At that time, 1,200 Lebanese were killed, mostly civilians, in a war that lasted more than a month. Israel and Hezbollah are old enemies. Tonight they're in a new war, and the people of Lebanon are caught in the middle. Southern Lebanon awoke to this. It looks like all-out war. The Israeli army says it hit 1,300 Hezbollah sites today. There were Gaza-style warnings telling residents to go, including from the Israeli leader.
Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now.
But where to find safety in the middle of all this? For one man, too late. My siblings and their children were all killed here, he says. The Israeli army insists its airstrikes are destroying weapons, some hidden in homes, and it accuses Hezbollah of using civilians as human shields. On the roads from the south, a mass exodus. So many heading to Beirut that the motorway became a one-way system. Ahmed says everyone fled his village because of airstrikes and destruction. There's no one left, he says. We took our belongings and went. So many new homeless now in this expanding war. In Beirut too, fear on the streets and a rush to get home. Are you feeling afraid? Sure, Mohammed tells me. I'm afraid for myself, my wife, and my 5 children. I don't know what to do. How long will we be living through this? We can't keep going. Parents were summoned to schools to pick up their children early. There were threats by phone, he says, that they'll hit Beirut. Some in the capital have been getting recorded messages telling them to go, including staff at Lebanon's information ministry. For months there have been fears of a wider war. Now the waiting is over. It's here. Israel's escalation is a huge risk, and not just for Lebanon, but for the entire Middle East. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Beirut.
Well, in northern Israel, people are living with the daily threat of rocket attacks by Hezbollah. Our correspondent Paul Adams is in northern Israel, where evacuees from closer to the border have been housed for almost a year. Paul.
Rita, amid this escalating conflict, no one on this side of the border was killed today, but life here is far from normal. We're about 20 miles from the Lebanese border, well outside an evacuation zone declared almost a year ago. But it's an area under threat. The jagged remains of a Hezbollah rocket. Nothing that happened in Israel today remotely compares with events across the border. But Hezbollah is hitting back. David had seconds to get his family into the safe room before the rocket came through his roof. The local rabbi comes to offer support. Israel, David says, did not want this war.
We don't have a war with them. They start with no reason. So now we are giving back. And it will be okay.
Do you feel lucky today?
Yes, very lucky.
Israel's defense minister has called on the public to show composure and discipline and listen to the instructions issued by the local authorities. It's only because the family who live here did precisely that no one was hurt. Across northern Israel, sirens wailed and rockets fell. Plenty of near misses. The government says it's determined to restore normal life here, to allow displaced civilians to return to their homes. But that's not going to happen while Hezbollah is still firing rockets deep into Israel.
Hezbollah on the 8th of October started firing on Israeli civilians in the northern border, and he's been doing this for over 11 months with 9,000 rockets, and 60,000 Israelis have left their homes. We have to act.
People were evacuated to this kibbutz a year ago, leaving vulnerable homes along the border. It's supposed to be safer, but today they were taking cover. So that's the second alarm we've had since we got here, just about an hour ago. Again, we can hear interceptions overhead. And as I look at the app here, I can see that there are alerts all over the place. This area remains in the firing line. If Hezbollah chooses to escalate, it could soon be the whole country. Paul Adams, BBC News, Northern Israel.
Well, let's speak now to Jeremy Bowen, our international editor who's in Jerusalem. And Jeremy, this feels like such a dangerous situation. What does each side think they can get out of this escalation?
Well, it's a really dangerous moment from Hezbollah's point of view. What they want to do is to keep on fighting. Fighting Israel is in their DNA. It is why they exist. And while their fight with Israel goes back to the 1980s, this, as you've been hearing, goes back to the day after Hamas attacked Israel. Now, the Israelis have been pushing harder in recent months, escalating steadily, but in the last week, as we've been seeing, it's been going much, much harder and faster. And while they have inflicted some grievous blows on their enemies in Lebanon, the Hezbollah infrastructure is much bigger than that. If you look at Gaza, after nearly 1 year, Israel still hasn't managed, for example, to destroy all the Hamas tunnels that have been built through sand. In Lebanon, they're built through rock, and the south is a much bigger area than Gaza. Israel effectively is gambling. What it's hoping is that by doing what it's doing, it will coerce Hezbollah into stop firing into Israel. I think that is probably unlikely. It means Israel will have to continue escalating. They've already said this is going into a new phase. And the ultimate escalation would be moving troops and tanks into Lebanon. That might be difficult, particularly since their forces, after a year of fighting in Gaza and a lot of violence on the West Bank as well, are tired. And at the moment as well, they need to mobilize more reserves to get to that point. But let's be very clear about this. This is a very dangerous moment, and right now it's all going in one direction.